Okay, I know what you're thinking. You're probably sitting there, shaking your head like, what did she get herself into this time? Trust me, I'm asking myself the same question. But hang on, let me rewind and set the scene. It all started like any other random Friday night. Except this time I was the one in the hot seat, and my best friend Karen was the one leading me into trouble. Again. Let me just paint a picture for you. I was lounging on the couch, trying to relax after a long week of pretending to be a responsible adult. My phone buzzed, and I looked down to see a text from Karen. It read, "So, I went to another swing party last night." Now, this wasn't the first time Karen had been to one of these parties. She had a whole repertoire of crazy stories about hot tubs, awkward encounters, and people who definitely didn't look like their photos. But somehow, I always managed to dodge the invites. I joke about it with her. Like, oh, I'm not really that adventurous, thanks for thinking of me. But deep down I was secretly curious. Maybe it was the fact that I hadn't been out in ages that made me say yes when Karen dropped the bomb on me. Maybe it was the fact that she texted me at the exact moment I was getting a little lonely. Yeah, let's go with that. You know how it is, when you've been on a dry spell and you start getting intrigued by anything that could break that cycle. So there I was reading her message. It had a bit of a taunting vibe, you know? She said, "I'm going to this party tomorrow. You should totally come. It's going to be unforgettable. Trust me, you've never had anything like it." Unforgettable. Like how unforgettable? I couldn't help it, the curiosity kicked in. So I asked, "Are there gonna be good-looking men there?" Karen replied with the usual smugness. "Oh yeah, trust me, you'll be happy with what you see." That should have been my first red flag. I'm sure I wasn't the only one who thought that sounded a bit too promising. But I was in. It was like she was offering me a mystery box of whatever. I didn't even know what the hell I was getting myself into, but I thought, hey, why not? Let's live a little. The next day Karen picked me up, and honestly I felt like I was going to a weird secret society meeting. You know when you feel like everyone else knows what's going on, and you're the one who showed up in a bizarrely casual outfit, expecting a super low-key event? Yeah, that was me. But I didn't want to seem totally out of my depth, so I just kept up the chatter. "So, who else is coming?" Yes. She glanced over at me, a little grin playing at the corner of her mouth. "I can't say much, but there will be enough people to keep things interesting." I raised an eyebrow. Interesting, huh? And that was when I realized. She wasn't telling me anything because she was totally enjoying my nervous excitement. We arrived at the venue, an inconspicuous building tucked away in a neighborhood where the houses were too fancy for me to ever imagine living in. I half expected someone to hand me a blindfold and make me say a secret password before letting me inside. Instead, the door opened, and a man with a charming smile greeted us. He didn't look like he was auditioning for any kind of horror movie, so that was a good sign. The first thing I noticed was the vibe. It wasn't what I expected, like no one was wearing leather, no one was making weird come-hither eyes at me. It was more like a cozy, interesting meeting with a few drinks and dim lights, where people just happened to be there. More open-minded than usual. Everyone was casually chatting, laughing, and looking totally normal. I looked around and thought, okay, this isn't so bad. Then, the men arrived. And by the men, I mean all 6 of them. And yes, I said 6. Not the 20-something I was low-key expecting. No, it was just 6. But here's the kicker. They were all, and I mean all, black. Now, I know it might sound like I'm making a big deal out of it, but honestly, I hadn't been prepared for that at all. It's not like I had a list of expectations for who would be there. Well, maybe I did, don't judge me, but this was definitely a surprise. And I could see Karen's gleam, like she knew I was already processing the what the hell moment. She leaned over and whispered in my ear. "Told you it would be unforgettable." I swear I nearly choked on my drink. But it didn't stop there. As the night progressed, I noticed something that made me both terrified and oddly intrigued. These guys weren't just good-looking. They had this quiet confidence about them. Like seriously confident. They made you feel like you were the most interesting thing in the room, like they were looking at you as if you were a secret treasure chest, just waiting to be opened. And trust me, I could feel their attention. Every glance, every smile. There was no escaping it. They weren't being creepy or anything. Just captivating in a way I hadn't experienced before. But that's the thing, right? Sometimes you get caught up in the moment before you even realize it. The night was still young, but let's just say I wasn't sure I was ready for what was about to come next. And maybe that's part of the fun, isn't it? The not knowing. Alright, I'm going to be straight with you. Things did get a little crazy. But before I jump into the madness, let me rewind just a bit because I need to make something clear. When Karen first invited me to the swing party, I was thinking there'd be a perfectly normal balance. Maybe 10 women, 10 men, everyone mingling, you know? Nice and easy. I'd have a little fun, probably have a glass of wine, and then leave with a whole bunch of new stories to tell. But, my friends, that was not what happened. The reality was, well, let's just say it was a bit of a shock to my system. There we were, just me, Karen, and 6 men. And when I say 6 men, I don't mean like 6 awkward, shy dudes who didn't know what to do with themselves. Well, these 6 were confident, each with their own presence. And all of them were dark-skinned. I'm not sure if I was more surprised by the fact that there were only 6 men, or by the fact that every one of them was, well, a whole vibe. I looked at Karen to see if she was feeling the same kind of panic that was slowly bubbling up in me. But no. She was practically glowing, like she was thriving in the middle of a dream come true. Meanwhile, I was standing there, trying not to look like I was about to bolt for the door. I took a deep breath and walked over to her, trying to keep my cool. Do you really want us to be the only 2 women here? I asked, my voice a little higher than I'd intended. My eyes flitted over to the 6 men, who were watching us like we were the stars of the show. I mean, it felt like a lot of attention for 2 girls, especially since the only thing I could think about at that moment was how badly I was underdressed for whatever this was. Karen gave me this look. One of those you can do this stares. She gave me a little shrug and said, well, yeah. Why don't you like it? Froze. Don't I like it? Was not the question I was asking. But before I could even respond, she grinned and dropped this bombshell. Actually, I was supposed to be the only one here, but I decided to take you. So you're welcome, girl. You're welcome. She winked at me like she was in on some huge joke that I had completely missed. And for the first time I felt like I'd made a big mistake. I wasn't prepared for this. The whole thing was so unexpected. But of course there was no turning back. Karen was happy, and I was too curious to leave. So I took a deep breath, smiled, more nervously than I wanted to admit, and decided to roll with it. Before I could second-guess myself, one of the men stepped forward. He had this confident swagger, like the kind of guy who had been in control of every room he'd ever walked into. He smiled at me, and let me tell you, it was one of those smiles that makes you forget what you were just thinking. We're all just here to have a good time, he said. His voice low and smooth. No pressure, just enjoying the night. I nodded, trying to appear cooler than I felt. But if I'm being real with you, my heart was racing. I tried to focus on my surroundings, anything to distract myself from the intensity of the situation. But no matter how much I told myself to stay cool, the whole place felt charged. The next thing I remember is when everyone was standing in a circle. Now, if you've never been the center of attention in a situation like this, let me tell you, it's overwhelming. I mean, I was trying to stay composed, but every glance, every subtle move felt like it was 100 times more intense. There was no escape. And, honestly, part of me didn't want to. The next thing I remember is how it all started to unfold. First, it was innocent, or at least it started that way. Just little gestures. I'm not even going to lie, there was something so thrilling about being the center of attention like that. Not in a selfish sense, but in the sense that I felt more confident, and I'm not going to lie, I liked it. But then, things shifted. First, it felt like a dance. Gentle, slow movements that I could follow. But then, just when I thought I had a handle on everything, something happened that completely took me by surprise. Something happened that I did not expect. Something that wasn't part of the plan. Something that made my heart jump out of my chest. I can't tell you exactly what it was yet. I'm still processing it. But trust me when I say this. It was definitely a moment I hadn't planned for. And it changed everything. Okay, so I'm just gonna be upfront with you. This is where things get a little intense. Like, we're not talking about light flirtation or some casual hand-holding, alright? No, this was a whole new level. But let me backtrack a bit because I'm sure you're all dying to know. I was lying there with Karen, feeling like we were in this crazy little bubble of our own, getting lost in the moment, just having fun. We were high, not in the literal sense, okay, maybe a little, but just in the sense that everything felt like a whirlwind. The energy was so charged, it was like we were in some alternate universe where everything was just right, laughing, the music in the background. It all felt like a fever dream. For a moment I told myself, why did I freak out earlier? This is actually kinda fun. Like, I felt like I was in a music video or something. Everything was smooth, everything was easy. But, as you can guess, that feeling didn't last long. And here's where it gets real. Not even 5 minutes after I had that thought, the dynamic shifted. People started joining in more actively. Like, it went from being this fun, casual thing to, well, not so casual. Suddenly, there were more hands, more bodies, and it wasn't all gentle caresses anymore. And look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you, okay? There were moments where it really, really hurt. Like, to the point where I thought something might actually break. And I know you're probably thinking, oh, come on, it can't be that bad. Well, let me tell you, it was bad. I mean, it hurt so much at certain points that I almost didn't know if I could take it. I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep going, but I told myself, don't be a wimp. You started this. You're not backing out now. But no joke, I was in pain. It wasn't just discomfort. There was a sharpness to it, almost like a pressure I couldn't escape. And for a split second, I was questioning every decision I'd ever made. Like, why didn't I just stay home with a bottle of wine and watch Netflix? But I didn't want to look weak, you know? I didn't want anyone to think I couldn't handle it. So, here I was, in the middle of this whole crazy situation, silently wishing for it to stop. And then, without really thinking about it, I just bolted. I made my way to the first floor, where the kitchen was. I could hear the muffled sounds of the party behind me, but I didn't care. I was trying to get away, trying to breathe. And that's when it happened. I started crying. Quietly, of course, because I didn't want anyone to know that I was, struggling. I just wanted to escape for a minute. I felt so overwhelmed. But here's the thing. I didn't want anyone to laugh at me for being weak. I mean, I had literally come here to have fun, not to end up sobbing in a kitchen like a mess. So I wiped my tears, took a few deep breaths, and reminded myself, you got this, girl. You can do this. And so I went back. Yeah, I went back to the madness. I told myself it was temporary, that the pain would fade. So I went back to finish what I had started. It hurt, no doubt, but at that point I was determined to stick it out. But here's the kicker. I didn't think I was going to make it. The next hour felt like an eternity. I was in pain. But I told myself, this is a once-in-a-lifetime thing. You can get through an hour of discomfort. You can imagine an hour of that, and by the end of it I was done. I don't know how, but I somehow made it through. And then came the most unexpected part. It was almost like a release. Not just physically, but emotionally. It wasn't a clean, graceful end like I imagined. No, it was messy and a bit chaotic, and let's just say, I ended up with ketchup. Yes, you heard that right. Ketchup. Now, I know what you're thinking. How did ketchup even factor into this? Well, I have no idea. But somehow, in the midst of everything, I found myself laughing at the ridiculousness of it all. And yeah, ketchup was somehow involved. It was bizarre, but somehow fitting in this crazy world I'd gotten myself into. Anyway, I'm still trying to process everything, but I think I made it through the worst of it. It's a weird, painful memory, but also kind of funny, in a why the heck did I do that way. I'll admit I learned a lot that night. Okay, so now that everything is over, well, let me tell you how the night wrapped up. It was definitely an experience, that's for sure. So picture this. I'm standing there, sweating like I just ran a marathon, which, let's be honest, felt like I had, and Karen and I are putting on our clothes. We wore a jacket. And then, just when I thought I could escape, one of the guys looks at me and says, "We'll see you tomorrow, right?" I almost choked on my own breath. Tomorrow. I immediately shook my head. Oh, no, I've got things to do tomorrow, sorry. I practically darted out the door, barely even pausing to grab my purse. I was out of there so fast, you would have thought the place was on fire. And of course Karen, she's walking next to me, practically floating on air, telling me how much she loved it. I could totally do that again, she says, all smiley and glowing. Meanwhile, I'm trying to keep it together, nodding like, yeah, it was cool. Definitely cool. I mean, totally. But let me tell you, there was no way I was ever going back. No way. It was fun in a way, but also just... nope. I don't know how she was so into it, but there was no repeat performance for me. Not unless they want to pay me a lot more than whatever that night was worth. Anyway, we got in the car and drove home. Karen's still on cloud 9, recounting every detail of the night, like she's reliving the best thing that's ever happened to her. Meanwhile, I'm just sitting there, trying not to make eye contact with the rearview mirror because it feels like I'm going to implode. When I got home, I swear to you, I was practically covered in ketchup. Yes, ketchup. Don't ask me how. It was everywhere. I didn't even want to think about it. My clothes had a bit of the mess on them too. So I go straight to the bathroom, toss my clothes in the laundry because ew, right? And then I go to wash my face. Now you may think I'm exaggerating, but I'm serious. I barely touched my body. Just hurt. And it wasn't because I was being dramatic, even though, okay, I am dramatic sometimes. It was because... well, it hurt. It hurt more than I thought it would. You know, you might be sitting there thinking, okay, girl, calm down. It's not that bad. But if you were me, you'd understand. When I say it hurt, I mean it. And I'm not talking about the kind of pain you get after a workout or after sitting too long. Well, this was different. Even when I just sat down, it was like there was a dull ache, a constant reminder of the night I could never unsee. And I'll admit it, it got to the point where I couldn't even sit properly for days. I'm serious. 5 days. I'm not exaggerating. 5 days of feeling like I'd just been through some kind of brutal obstacle course. You probably think it's hilarious. Oh, poor thing. She's so dramatic. Well, let me paint you a picture. Imagine you're in my shoes, you're sore in places that shouldn't hurt. You're walking around like you're an old lady with a bad back. You sit down and it's like someone's poking you with a hot iron. And, for the love of all things holy, you just want to get through the day without wincing every time you move. It's not funny, trust me. It wasn't like I could just take an aspirin and be done with it. No. It was a real struggle. So, while Karen is probably over there still daydreaming, I'm sitting here in pain, questioning every life decision that led me to this moment. But hey, what's a little pain compared to? Well, the experience, right? Sarcasm fully intended. Anyway, that's my story. If you're thinking of doing something like this, take my advice. Think twice. And maybe, just maybe, go to a spa afterward. Because I'll tell you right now, after what I went through, I'll never be that adventurous again. Or at least not without a whole lot of planning. And maybe a good seat cushion. Alright, my loves, before you go off and start making any wild decisions based on my ridiculous story, I need to set something straight. Please do not do what I did. Seriously, just don't. I'm sharing this with you not to encourage anyone to go out and replicate the chaos, but more as a lesson because I sure as heck learned a lot from it. This whole thing. Yeah, it was entertaining, but it was also a huge mistake. I learned about my boundaries, what I'm willing to do, and, most importantly, that some experiences look way better in theory than they actually are in real life. Trust me, I'm never going down that path again. Ever. And I don't recommend you do either. I'm just being real with you here. And here's a little secret for you. A month has passed since all that drama went down. And guess what? Karen, my lovely friend who dragged me into all this, has already gone back to those parties 3 more times. 3. She's even calling me now, complaining about how it's not as fun as she thought it would be anymore. Funny, huh? She feels the exact same way I did after the first time. I laugh at her every time she calls me with those complaints. I mean, girl, you're the one who made this whole mess your thing in the first place. I think she's finally starting to get it, though. Her eyes are opening to what I learned the hard way. But hey, that's life, right? We all have to learn our own lessons. At least I can say I survived and came out of it a little wiser. So, if anything, I'm here to let you know that sometimes, experiences don't turn out the way we think they will, and that's perfectly okay. Now, just a quick little plug, don't hate me for this. I do have a Patreon. Yep, that's right. I'm going to be uploading some exclusive content soon, and trust me, you're not going to want to miss it. There's going to be all kinds of interesting stuff. It'll be fun, real, and totally worth your time. So, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe. The link's in the description. You won't regret it, I swear. Anyway, thank you so much for listening to this whole crazy story. You guys are the best. Seriously. I love you all and I'm sending you a million kisses. Take care, stay smart, and never forget your worth. See you next time.